Hey. So, quite often on my videos, I get like one person disliking the video. I have no idea why. So I can guess, but that's it. And sometimes I get a comment that, at least in my head, is like, not a fuck you, but like something that, you're an arrogant fuck just spewing garbage on the internet. And yes, I am that as well. But one comment had me thinking enough to do not a response to this one comment, because it's not really about that one commenter, but I had said in a recent video that there was this list I didn't understand. And the commenter said, yeah, well, there are many ways to play bolt action. Just because you don't understand a list doesn't mean it's not good. Okay. I'm not sure I agree, but that is definitely a possibility. But I thought about it, made a PowerPoint. It's a PowerPoint about how I analyze stuff, what it is that I do on this channel, how I analyze lists, and what I believe goes into winning. So, let's do this. Let me just set up the PowerPoint here. Here we go. So this is what I believe go into winning lists and what I go into a victory at a tournament. So one thing I believe is very important is the player's skill. And we can see that just by looking at tournaments, results over many tournaments. It is quite often the same players that win. It is quite often the same players that are placed in the top 5, top 10, whatever. And I think that is because player skill actually matters in deciding tournaments, in deciding games. It matters how good you are at this game. It's to do with different aspects, sure. It's to do with planning. It's to do with focus during the game itself. It's about how good you are at calculating risks and taking calculated risks. It's about, just like in chess, about thinking a couple of moves ahead, maybe even a couple of turns ahead. You can see me doing this on a recent video where 4 turns before I do something, even more, I had planned this from the start. So I was in my deployment planning on what I would do in turn 5. Right? Not everyone does that. Some people do, and I think the players who are really good do. The players who are really good also have a lot of experience, so they've experienced quite a lot of situations, of game situations, that they can translate into making a really good to-do list, an order of battle. What is most important right at this moment? That is often based on experience, on what you have experienced before, so that you take the right decisions at the right moments. So all of that, for me, is player skill. And that does matter. That's a huge part of what goes into a victory at a game and at a tournament. For me, I believe so. I can't prove it, but there are clear indications because the same people are winning again and again, right? So for me, that's one thing that's very, very important. And it's very difficult to quantify, and it's very difficult to actually analyze what it is that those players are doing. But I'm doing a lot of, interviews with top players. I believe I myself, having played a lot of top players, being considered a top player by other players, I believe I have something there that I can contribute with. There's also, of course, luck. Dice luck is a thing, and some players famously complain about their luck or lack of luck with dice, which can be a thing. I mean, we can record games and just go over all the dice rolls and average them up and see if one player was more lucky than the other player. But I will say this, my belief is that dice over enough rolls turn out average for everyone. That's just it. I don't believe in anything supernatural, although I do behave like I believe in some supernatural stuff. But I don't think that it's true. I think that over time, the dice rolls for everyone should be average. However, single dice rolls are a lot more swingy. They are 1 to 6, right? So if I roll 6 dice on average, I should at least get a 6, 1 6. But if I roll 1 dice, it's way more swingy what I get, right? So for me, luck is not a factor that is very important, both because it's something that I can't decide, I can't influence my luck, and also because I think it's just average. So for me and for a lot of good players, luck is not a factor that they calculate with. Luck is a calculation of risk. How risky is this? What are the odds of something happening? That is what we play on, not luck. And then we get to lists, because a lot of this channel is about lists, and that happened by accident. It wasn't, I didn't like set out to be the guy who rates everyone's lists. It just happened. But when I read lists, there are 2 things that I look for. Is it optimized in a points for value sense? And does it fit a meta? And I know that there are different metas, and I've calculated and watched and worked on these metas for quite some time. So I know something about these metas, more than some people apparently believe I do. I know what people in different areas consider good, and I know also that the more that we all consume content on the internet, even my content is contributing, our meta is slowly converging into a single meta. Just what happens when this game became a little bit more than just a niche game. So with list optimization, or with lists in general, that's what I look for. I look for, is it points for value good? Have they chosen optimized units? Are these set up in a way that is optimized, that spends the least amount of points for the greatest amount of value? And that's an evaluation. That's me just pulling stuff out of my experience. Let's say my experience. I'm pulling stuff out of that. But also what a lot of other players that talk to me about optimization, about units, point for value, what they are saying. I'm not just imagining this. It's something that people are saying to me as well. So it's a sort of a reflection of all of that. And there are certain unit types that are considered good, certain units that for their function in the game, for what they do, are considered better than other units. Just like chess, a rook is not the same as a queen, right? They do different things. They can do different things. I evaluate them differently. They have different functions. And that is all influenced by meta. For instance, how many order dice do you need in a list? Well, there's a Goldilocks zone, I think. But where that Goldilocks zone is depends on your local meta, what people think in your local meta. For instance, last tournament I went to, we sort of figured out that for 1100 points, 19 to 20 order dice was maybe too high for the Goldilocks zone. That maybe the Goldilocks zone was 18 to 16 order dice for 1100 points. Because of where people ended up with the results and stuff. So there is a Goldilocks zone, and it shifts a little bit back and forward. It's also shifted a little bit with version 3. And we're still locking down exactly where it is. We don't know exactly yet, but we do have ideas, right? Built on experience. And there are also like certain army builds that are good in certain metas. For instance, right now I'm looking over Warzone Atlanta, and there's a lot of army builds that I thought were gone for good. Like there's a lot of people bringing Recce. There's a lot of people bringing barbecue armies. I thought these were gone because they're not good in my meta at all. Does that mean that they can't work? No, it doesn't. It just means that they have been nerfed, and some players are bringing them to Warzone Atlanta. We don't know yet why, and we don't know how good they are. I think they're bad. I think it's a bad choice. I think it's a bad choice, a sub-optimized choice. I'm not crapping on any players, particular players, or any ideas you may have. I just think that it is not the optimal choice. Same goes for nations. Some nations are better than others. We've always, all through version 2, the Brits were maybe one of the best nations. Then we had a short period here where everyone thought that the Soviets were best. Right now, I think potentially it's the Germans or the Finns. It shifts around, right? But tracking all of that, the meta, is what I do on this channel. And I do that by looking at what people are doing, not just by guessing. I also think that terrain and mission has a huge influence on who wins a game, who wins a tournament. Because there are some missions that are not well suited for tournament play. They are unbalanced, or they favor one type of army, one army build. So if you have like a very high order dice count, that may be favored or not favored by the mission. If you have a lot of vehicles, that may be favored or not favored by the mission. The same goes for the terrain. Terrain can really mess up your army. If you've got an army that's got a lot of motorized stuff, right? With a lot of regular wheeled vehicles, and you get a table where there's rough ground everywhere, you can't move. What are you going to do? And that can really destroy your chances of winning a tournament. And then there's the competition, the environment, the group of people you're in. And I'm, again, not trying to sound arrogant here. I don't know how to say this without sounding arrogant. You can be in a group of players. It can be a large group of players, or it can be a small group of players. And in that group of players, you can have a number of skilled players, like competitive players, players who are good, have high player skill, and that can be a large number or a small number. Right, so you can have, and I'm not saying this happened at. All of this was caused by the winning list at LVO, which I didn't think was a particularly good list. Well done to the player, no doubt, but I didn't think the list was optimized. I don't know what players went to LVO. I don't know how good they were, or how many of them there were. So it could have been that LVO had a very small attendance of very skilled, very competitive players, or not. We don't know. So when I look at a list in isolation, all of this is gone, right? This context is gone. I don't have this. I can just look at a list and say, well, I understand this, or this is optimized or not. Because the competition that you're in, the harder it is, the more people there are, the harder it is to win. So last weekend, Aaron, whom I interviewed, he won Cancun, 51 players. Lot of players. I don't know how many of them were very skilled. I don't know how many of them were very competitive. I don't know how many of them were at a level where I could go to an international tournament, a world team championship or something, and face them and they feel like, ooh, I'm really being challenged right now. I don't know, right? I don't know. I just know that there was a lot of players, and that in itself is difficult. But having a lot of very skilled players at a tournament event makes it a lot harder to win that event. I can say that much. It also means that you get better, by the way, because you have skilled opponents who will teach you stuff, right? So this picture I'm in right here is from NTS previous weekend, where for most of the tournament, I was ahead, right? I was on the top table every single game of that tournament until I get to the finals where Michael Fie wins against me. And that game against Michael Fie was one of the best games I've had because it was so goddamn hard. It was a very, very high level game. Michael Fie is my usual sparring partner, and it's not always that he's that good, but he was absolutely on point. And I also felt, he told me this as much, that I didn't make mistakes either. It was just one of those games where both players felt like the other player was really, really, really good. Now, going through the tournament as a whole, there was a number of players who were good, but that was the highest level I've seen played at that tournament. It was just awesome. It was amazing, an amazing game. So competition makes you better. And for some players who are maybe in a small meta, in a small group of players, or who are in a group where there are not that many competitive players, they will struggle, or they will more easily become like the best player, but they're not actually that good. They're that good in that little group, but maybe not equally good to go to the WTC and beat the Spanish team, which is, what you need to do in order to consider yourself good, I think, just because I have. And there's also the playstyle. There are different playstyles. Like some lists have a certain playstyle, where that is the way you want to play them. So are there many ways to play bold action? Yes. There are many ways to play bold action. Are they all equally good? No, not at all. That's my claim here. There are not many ways to win tournaments. There are not many ways to consistently win games. Those are very limited, and I study them with all diligence because that is what this channel is all about. So yeah, there are many ways to play bold action, but there are only a few ways to win. There is something that is better than other things. That's what version 2 taught us, and that I think still holds true in version 3. Although this early in the version, the meta of what you can do and what people are trying to do is much broader than it was at the end of version 2. Because the meta hasn't stagnated yet. People are still trying to do a lot of different things, and some results are coming in that will show us what is good, what is not. All of that will, over time, it'll get fixed down to just a few things you can do. So, in general, my philosophy is that list analysis is good. It's a approximately 60% indicator of who wins. I can look over the lists for a tournament, as I'm doing for Warzone Atlanta right now. I can look over the lists and just based on those, give them my 1 to 5 and be approximately 60% accurate. Like 60% of the people I say will end up in the top 10 will, just based on lists. I still think that non-optimized lists that win tournaments, that's a little bit weird. Something is going on there. And you guys may think that it's because my analytical skills are not that good or I don't understand the game. You're welcome to think that. I don't think that. I think it's because something else is going on. I believe that lists can be read and can be understood as intentions of how you play. I believe I am fairly skilled at reading lists. That is what other people tell me as well. As what is it that this list wants to do? How does this player want to play the game? How do they want their list to perform? What are their plans going into a game? I'm fairly good at that. And that sounds arrogant again. Sorry, but I am. I've done it a lot on this channel, way more than I wanted to. What about player analysis? And that's a weird one, isn't it? I am almost 80% accurate. If I know the players going to a tournament, for instance, look at my coverage of NTS. If I know the players, I can be fairly certain who will end up in the top 5, top 10, right? I'm approximately 80% accurate in my guesswork there, especially if I know both the players and the lists. And that's down to peer ranking. That's down to me being a highly competitive player who looks at other players and say, you're about this good compared to me, right? And also, of course, looking back and looking at the players, their results from the last tournaments. I mean, that also takes effect. So you can do player analysis, but it is a little less points for value. I mean, the points for value thing is fairly obvious. You can do that with people's lists. Evaluating players like I do is something where you have to know them a little bit, and quite often you will have to have played games against them or seen them play games in order to be able to evaluate how good is this player actually. Right. So my thanks today, that was it, by the way. My thanks today goes out to people who write comments instead of just disliking my videos. Write a comment. Tell me what's wrong. But don't just tell me that my sound is off again. I'm doing what I can. I have this really nice microphone. I am trying about the sound, and I can't hear that something is wrong with my own videos. All the videos where people complain about the sound, I don't know. But if you dislike my videos, if you give it a thumbs down, please let me know why. Let me know what it is that bothers you, and I will try to be less arrogant or something. I don't know. Anywho, thank you all for listening. That was a little bit of a rant about how I analyze and evaluate stuff. See you next time.